Hello and welcome everyone. For those of you that may just be joining us for the first time this afternoon, my name is Adam Hoffman and I'm the Vice President of Global Brand and Community here at Singularity University. We're very, very excited to have you here today. I'll spare you the Singularity intro. If you're curious about learning more in between one of these breaks, go visit su.org to learn more about who we are and what we do. So let's get into it. Today, or at least in this session, we've got James Erlich, who is an entrepreneur in residence at the Stanford University School of Medicine in the Health and Human Performance Department. As part of the Stanford Flourishing Project, as part of the Stanford Flourishing Project. He's also a faculty member here at Singularity University, a senior fellow at NASA Ames Research Center, and was appointed to the Obama White House Task Force on Regenerative Infrastructure. And so he's going to be talking to us today about the future of safe living in self-reliant neighborhoods. Thanks for joining us.
It's an honor to be here, and I hope everybody is out there staying safe and healthy. That's really important, of course. Social distancing, washing hands. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. I'm sharing the screen with you right now. That is extremely optimistic. It is this concept of a really cost-effective, proven solution for killing viruses. And it is called ozone therapy. And Dr. Robert Rowan has a published, peer-reviewed paper on this topic that I really wanted to start my talk about, just because it is a really interesting and hopeful solution, we believe, to eradicating the COVID-19 pandemic. So essentially, ozone therapy oxidizes viruses. Dr. Rowan was in Sierra Leone during the Ebola crisis and cured 5 of 5 patients that he was allowed access to, and without any further complications. Really unheard of kind of thing. Ozone therapy also is been proven to literally destroy bacterial infections. And so there's a paper. I'll be sharing the link where it's published shortly. People can be able to go and learn more about this. And the idea really is to bring this effective treatment to the masses around the world and get us a handle in a very, like I said, cost-effective, safe, and proven therapy. So I'm here to talk about today the future of living, and again, talking about optimistic things and where we can find safety, sanctuary, security, coming out of the current situation that we have right now. What I would like to do before I start answering questions about ozone therapy or other things is let me get through this presentation as I've planned it, and then I'm happy to take questions. So right now we have a situation where people are self-isolating, and this has been a sort of an ongoing theme. It's been in major newspapers, magazines, news stories around the world about people being ahead of the curve on this topic. And part of those people being ahead of the curve, for some reason, has been super wealthy people. And so there's been these news stories about these folks creating resiliency for themselves and their families and their friends by investing in the last few years in these kind of refurbished bunkers and missile silos, for instance. So this is a facility. It's a place in Rothenstein, Germany. It's an abandoned Soviet-era weapons depot. It's embedded inside of actually a hill, inside of a mountain, underground. And we take just a very quick, brief tour of what life is like for some of these folks who have invested in living underground with this kind of wealth. And the reason why I bring it up is because you can see here that there's been some planning and some thought process to some where they're thinking things are going to go or things are going. And you can Of course, you can see that these are not the bomb shelters of our parents or grandparents from the 40s or 50s or 60s, but rather, quite palatial spa-like settings, including cocktail lounges and bars, and of course, being well stocked up on the critically important things. And that also includes a 5-year supply of everything that someone could imagine that they need. So it's a lot of, I guess, foie gras and caviar for those folks. In terms of infrastructure, they've really been thinking quite a lot, and it's most of it is current existing petroleum-based kind of military-grade redundancy. But even these kinds of systems really are proven to go wrong, and they can go wrong pretty badly, and that's something that we're preoccupied with. One of the key things that these folks are most afraid of, their greatest existential threat, these wealthy folks, is one thing: us. And so part of their association fee, believe it or not, every month is this militia that will pick them up at a private airstrip, bring them to their bunker or their silo, and protect them, allegedly. So I think that's a really interesting point about the rest of us and how we can help those billionaires live safely in those silos without fear of us, because the truth is, the real hedge for billionaires is how the rest of us can live in regenerative resiliency. And that's the basis of my research over 15 plus years, case study research of organic, biodynamic, family farming, intentional communities, eco-villages, collaboratives, and co-housing, etc. And the truth is that there is a master plan that we have that enables a software stack, essentially, to create the neighborhoods of the future around clean food, clean water, clean energy, and circular waste to resource systems. And that this kind of decentralized living is something that, as a species, we used to have. Pretty much living up to 1950, almost 3/4 of the world's population lived in self-sustaining small communities. And what does that mean? It means having agency and access to your own food supply that is grown at your doorstep. And we would argue that this kind of farming practices, non-till soil, bio-organic, regenerative farming, allows for greater bioavailability of nutrition. Not to mention nowadays absolute food security, because it's right there, as we mentioned, at your doorstep. Also, the idea of controlled environment farming, so effluent-based vertical farming, where we use fish, shrimp, crawfish. These are freshwater fish species. Their waste is ammonia. It gets converted to nitrates through a very light biological interaction. And then that water is pumped up with a very low energy water pump to the top of these lattices. The plants dangle in this roots, effluent rich, nutrient rich water. And then the water comes back down to the fish tanks. And we've been able to save almost, I would say 80% water in farming like this, with almost 1/3 increase in effective yield. So this is just a brief kind of virtual reality fly-through of one of the controlled vertical farm environments. And one of the key things that we've been researching over the last few years at Stanford is how can we continually feed the fish, feed the chickens, and use food and animal waste to do that. So we use aquatic red worms, we use black soldier fly larvae. Both of these creatures are fantastic nutritional inputs for the chickens and the fish, but they eat their own weight every day in food and animal waste. And what's quite remarkable about this whole process is that their externality, their output, their waste is nutrient-rich topsoil. that's microbe filled. Now, this is absolute gold. It's one of the things on planet Earth right now that we need more than ever, which is to look at how we can restore ecosystems in such a way that they can provide abundant, flourishing surplus to everybody on planet Earth. So imagine this idea that you can look at, even at brownfield or grayfield locations, and see those communities be restored. That's part of our metabolic integration. So basically, previous neighborhood developments focused on separate food, water, energy, waste systems, siloed systems. So for the first time, we actually have a platform using software, our village operating system software, that will allow for these kinds of previously siloed neighborhood infrastructure pieces to not only know about each other, but to learn from each other and autonomously improve. And that to us is really the future of robotics and artificial intelligence and machine learning, that it can be brought forward to exponential purposes that support and benefit people living in communities. So that's the basis of our Regenerative Village Simulator software, which is then coupled with our village operating system software that actually runs these communities. And we use this really as a method going forward to master plan and digitally twin to manage these kinds of communities around the world. And imagine from a Buckminster Fuller perspective or an Elon Musk perspective, how neighborhoods in similar climate zones can communicate with each other and autonomously improve. And that really, for us, is the future of living in a border-free data software technology era. And really, it's not Star Trek. It's not a holodeck. It's about logical infrastructure surrounding energy-positive home typologies, where the key is, and as we come through this virus especially, and we can get back to connectivity again and being close to each other again, that this is some of the greatest research in how people are living past 100, 110 years old, never seeing doctor, never taking pharmaceuticals. That's part of the blue zone research, which my research parallels almost 15 years worth. But also that we can be reimagining open spaces, especially in peri-urban and rural areas, for celebration of seasonality. We can get to a place where Mother Earth is meeting us halfway, where we can help her, she's going to help us for the long term. And that's really the basis of this idea of creating master plans around community developments, where especially when you start to spread people back out into the peri-urban and rural areas, you have stronger, healthier communities that can withstand and protect against other kinds of both climate change anomalies that are happening, and of course what we're experiencing right now with this pandemic. And the basis of this really is that 2/3 or more of the open space is productive for clean food, clean water, clean energy, and turning waste into asset class managed resources. So the idea of mobility also is changing. We see this rapidly all around us. Autonomous transit is coming, certainly within the next decade. And especially when you're looking at like Virgin Hyperloop and other kinds of things, the idea of living further and further away from cities is actually going to become desirable and high value. And part of that also for us is social affordable access, being able to have units where the least in our community are capable of not only living in a beautiful community like this, but also that over a period of 20 plus years of being involved in the community, they can get title or ownership in their flat or their tiny home. But also it's a great place for families and communities, for people, seniors and those with disabilities. And of course that they would have villas, but the villas are also in high demand from people interested in micro mortgages and sharing these kinds of spaces. So we've looked at and are really interested in examining ways to have mitigation zones, and really learning more and more now about what that actually means in construction and development of new build housing. And so, effective negative pressure in structures allows for the elimination of all kinds of pathogens and things that otherwise need to be, mitigated with cleaning supplies. You can do, with the right kind of HVAC systems. So the other part of what we're looking at is how can we prefab and create an industrialized approach to living in these safe, healthy future communities. And part of that is prefab modular construction. So it would be a combination of circular building materials like wood, pine, etc. That these also would include hempcrete, which is an antimicrobial building material. And the main idea here is that these communities are using circular building materials that are earthen, that are pest resistant, mildew resistant, that are healthy to live in, and really are about the future of how we live on this planet now. And that we can bring this to the global south, to rural India, to sub-Saharan Africa, to ASEAN, through 3D printing. Imagine extruding hempcrete in these kinds of robotic systems. That will allow for people to actually move into a house within a few days, costing less than $5,000 each, fully furnished and finished. So we have looked at urban resiliency. Just so you know, my thesis is really outside of cities because I grew up in Manhattan. I grew up in New York City. It's a fantastic place, but it's also extremely brittle. And I think now more than ever, people are beginning to rethink very carefully about their ideas of living in megacities, especially coastal megacities. But we can look at near suburban, near urban area building structures for rooftop farming, and especially if there's some adjacent space, we can actually create resiliency. This is an amazing architect, Vincent Calbeau. This is a regenerative resilient tower in Taipei, in Taiwan, which is, by the way, one of the best governments right now in the world in terms of dealing with COVID. And this is an example of the kind of design thinking of a residential tower that considers its own water capture, its own energy generation, and some amount of leafy green food production. We can get some Band-Aid resiliency, if you will, to the rooftops. So zero mass water, for instance, is this amazing technology. Just out of thin air, it's able to create 5 to 18 liters of water per day right to your kitchen sink. So it's a solid state rooftop kind of device. There's different kinds of wind turbines, balcony solar panels, different kinds of ways to make plant and food growth happen even on a small balcony. And really what I'm talking about here, because I'm based at Stanford University, I'm based in the Bay Area. Currently, we're on a lockdown. We are unable to leave our house, and campus is closed for the indefinite future. So what is it that we're really talking about here? That the future of living can and ought to be living in these very strong, very resilient peri-urban and rural areas where we're surrounded by and have agency and access to our natural resources, organic, biodynamic, permaculture, farm-to-table experiences. This is healthy, happy, optimistic way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this opportunity to share more information. You can learn more at regenvillages.com. We are always happy to have the support of folks interested in participating with us. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, James. You've certainly inspired a lot of people and lots of questions about where these things are, how they exist, how do they get involved. So we will go to questions here as soon as I swap this out.
Yeah, I saw a lot of questions on the side, and it's not that I was ignoring them. I just I'm really quite passionate about getting this message out, that we have this opportunity right now to really hit the reset button and really think about how we want to live going forward. And it's all about optimism. It really is. So I hope people can forgive me for the first few slides about how the 1% are living, and it's nothing against them at all. Absolutely. God bless them for having the foresight to be ahead of the curve like this. I'm preoccupied and concerned with the rest of us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the way that you ended up framing that was really helpful. Is like, you're contrasting billionaires with the billions, which is definitely a question right now. Talk a little bit about where do some of these villages exist? Like, if somebody wanted to go visit one, can they do that?
Well, we're in the process right now of raising funds to build the first pilot community. So we've been stuck in between as a software company and a real estate development company as a Stanford University spinoff that I founded in 2016. We were prescient in the fact that we created an EU holding company, but there's plenty of opportunities for us to build this in the US and Canada, all around the world, really. There are examples of highly functional eco-villages, Findhorn in northern Scotland. There's Oroville in southern India, about 100 kilometers south of Chennai, and they're low-tech solutions, which is great, but they work. They're functional.
Yeah, so cool. So you guys are trying to build the first one. I see somebody has posted the link in here, so if you're interested in learning more, definitely go and check that out. When it comes to what we're dealing with today and how you've got San Francisco and basically the entire peninsula on lockdown, is that something that you think would change if more resilient villages like these existed?
There's no doubt. Really, what it comes down to is that when you have everything you pretty much need at the neighborhood scale, at your doorstep, then the fear and the anxiety of having to run to the supermarket is removed, because you know that those pieces are there for you, number one. Number two, because people are living less stressful lives, their immune systems are boosted. And living in community where people care about each other and surrounded, in those kinds of spaces, actually is the basis of the blue zone research, where people are living very long, happy longevity. So all of those are markers, really, for what we're doing also at Stanford Flourishing Project, which is how we can really look at all of these sort of Venn overlays for what we need, really, to live strong, healthy, happy lives that are decentralized. And by decentralized, I don't mean libertarian politically. I mean decentralized in the sense that when district scale services go on the fritz, not if, but when they do, whether it's water pipelines, food matrices right now, other kinds of waste systems, whatever, that Regen Villages neighborhoods are humming along.
Got it. Another good question that came in was around, do you think that these types of communities can emerge in existing populated areas, or do they need to kind of pop up from scratch somewhere new?
Well, we can look at retrofits. I mean, most of our work has really been on new build, greenfield areas, especially outside of cities. If you look at most of the rural areas around the world, they're in deep decline because they've been sold a bill of goods that they ought to pack up and move to the city if they want to live the life. And the truth is, I think most anyone or everyone would agree at this point, is that the cities have continually not delivered on the promise of that kind of lifestyle. And moreover, you have these concentric rings of poverty around most megacities. And there's such an imbalance, an economic inequality, which can absolutely lead to disaster. So what we're saying is, hey, we can build with an industrial kind of framework these kinds of communities at scale around the world. There's 12 trillion US dollars transiting from fossil fuel investments. There's 25 or so trillion US dollars parked offshore from wealthy companies and individuals. There's a way for us, in other words, to take a few billion here or there and be able to create actually many of these lily pads of smart, safe, resilient communities that are communicating with each other through the cloud, through data, to autonomously improve their functionality. It's a beautiful way to imagine living on this planet, as opposed to having to imagine going to Mars or somewhere else first.
Totally. I mean, just looking at those photos, maybe we want to be living there right now. I'll tell you that much. All right. Next up, people would like to know, what is the best way to start doing some of this at home? Especially if you live in a highly populated area like a condo or an apartment in New York, London, Tokyo, etc.
I just provided my email address, by the way. If people want to reach out to me. I can also provide my Stanford email address too. There are solutions, as I mentioned, I showed in the presentation. There are some rooftop solutions for water capture. There are wind turbines, small wind turbines that you can put on your apartment roof and provide some cabling to your balcony apartment. There's opportunities to grow some healthy, nutritious things, even in your windowsill. There's a bunch of interesting appliances. IKEA has some home appliances. Others have some kind of small aquaponic systems. Most of this, to be honest, is leafy greens and microgreens, maybe some tomatoes and strawberries and things. Not quite enough for the full menu that we're planning. Robust, full kind of dietary, nutritional needs. Just so you know, Regen Villages was really born out of me being a foodie. I traveled around the world for quite a long time, filming these case studies of these organic family farms, which then led to a public television cooking show. And so trying to imagine building beautiful neighborhoods around life-affirming, beautiful recipes. And that's really what we've come from.
Oh, got it. I did not know that. I think that the next thing that I see coming up here is talking about implementing this at scale. And I think really what's under this is, do you see these types of villages replacing cities or acting as supplements to cities?
It's a complete supplement to a city. Look, I grew up in Manhattan, and I can see the comment there with healthy skepticism, and I'm always grateful for those comments, because it's one of the biggest points we get is that sustainability by proximity and density makes the most sense. But I think now we can all agree with what's going on with COVID, that that's not necessarily the best solution for 25, 35 million people to be crammed into one city location. So we're not talking about taking Mumbai from 37 million people down to 5 million people. We are talking about maybe preventing Mumbai going to 50 million people. And that's really the cause celeb here, is that there's so many open space, rural, peri-urban areas that are in need for rejuvenation, for new kinds of economic models. And people are going to start shifting in any case from work and job mentality and economics into what I'm calling some more self-worth, right? Because that's the new technological age that we're going to be living in. So living as a supplement to the big cities, from our perspective, is more and more of these villages that we can create, the more safety and resiliency and tranquility it will bring. It will lower burdens on healthcare systems. It will lower burdens on rural areas, on governments, small, mid, and national.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's worth pointing out here is that, and I say this as more as a check with you, is that you're not suggesting that some of the things that people have mentioned around the current way that people live rurally, with having to drive further and you're burning materials and what have you. You're not saying that that is better. You're saying that this is essentially an entirely new model, not promoting the current rural lifestyle or format.
Well, I just had a wonderful conversation with the folks from Virgin Hyperloop last week. They're doing a nice article about regen villages. And what's really interesting is that this is a kind of technology, exponential technology, that can reinvent rural areas that don't require getting in a car and driving distances, but that can actually be wherever those stops are along the way. If you start to imagine these beautiful regenerative communities being built, then all of a sudden your access to a metropolitan area for cultural reasons, let's say, or educational reasons or whatever, is a few minutes by Hyperloop or by a drone taxi or other kinds of electric vehicles. So we're all about the neighborhood connectivity, car-free environments that are, at least on the periphery, two-way EV charging and battery storage. But for the most part, that more and more people are going to take this experience of living in isolation in this moment, hopefully, into a new world era where living further from cities becomes really appealing and really healthy and really just something that's just fulfilling on so many levels. And that's really where, I've been waving this flag for quite a long time. And many people 6 years ago, and sort of counting down less and less, but thought that I was certifiably crazy, including colleagues, at Stanford and other places, because who wants to leave the city? The city has everything. And I kept saying, well, as some things are going to start happening, there's going to be climate change anomalies. I certainly wasn't anticipating this in this moment to be on lockdown. But there's been questions about the ozone therapy. If people email me, I'm happy to share the link to Dr. Rowan's published work. It's quite phenomenal. Just so you know, Elon Musk, Nikola Tesla, he invented an ozone machine, and it was a practical treatment for over 100 years. So it is proven and safe, and that's something I just wanted to let people know about.
All right. Well, with that, let's wrap up. Any parting thoughts for the audience you'd like to share?
Yeah, if you do happen to know some of these billionaires out there who we're trying to protect from the zombie apocalypse by building as many regen villages as possible, we would be really grateful because we are in a Series A round and we're looking to raise funds. And we're the Rolling Stones of eco-villages. 90 million web impressions, over 20,000 families have signed up, and we've got a great team of people. And I'm really honored and blessed to be able to be part of Singularity University and to be able to share this message with everybody. So thanks again.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here, James. We appreciate it. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Yeah, you too. Take care, everybody.
All right. Well, I don't know about you, but I could definitely go for a space like that looks as green and pleasant as it does right now, with everything going on in the world. So, as with anything that we bring to you, we aim to bring a diverse perspective on what the future might look like, and help you think about it. So, definitely take some time to check out Regen Villages. I think what James is up to is super, super interesting. As it relates to the COVID stuff and treatments, like all the other stuff that we're sharing here, please go and do your research on it. Make sure to check it out as well. So thank you for being part of this session. We have, let me just do a quick count, 1, 2, 3 more sessions left. We're getting into genetics, then we're going to AI, then we're going to talk about a little bit of leadership, and then we're going to wrap it up. So if you've been here all day, thanks for staying here, being here. If you're just now joining us, excited for our last couple sessions of the day. And just so everybody knows, today's recordings are available as replays in Crowdcast. Yesterday's recordings are available on YouTube. The team will share a link if they haven't already in the chat. We are doing our best to go and get these slides from our presenters We're juggling a lot right now with our small team on the project, but we will do our best to make sure that you either get them now or you get them here in a couple days. But we promise we'll get you as many slide decks and follow on resources as humanly possible. So I'm going to go take a quick break, switch sessions, and I will see you all back here in about 5 minutes. Thanks.